And our next story is about Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, someone who loves to wade into the internal affairs of other countries. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. For the last 3 years, Trudeau has been accused of giving a platform to anti-India and pro-Khalistan voices in Canada. This activism started in 2020. There were some protests in India, protests that became a victim of radical agendas. And this is when Trudeau decided to lecture India, notwithstanding his own track record. We'll get to that in just a bit. First, let's tell you why we are talking about him tonight. You see, just a few days ago, the Indian government summoned the Canadian envoy over increasing pro-Khalistan activities in Canada. And this included protests outside Indian missions in Canada, and the most latest instance of a parade float depicting India's former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's assassination at a rally in Brampton. And this protest also included quote-unquote "Kill India" posters that were put up by Khalistan supporters. Justin Trudeau was recently questioned about these gatherings and why Canada is even allowing them to take place. He was asked if his government is being soft on Khalistan supporters for electoral gains. This is what he had to say about it. Let me quote. "They are wrong. Canada has always taken extremely seriously violence and threats of violence. We have always taken serious action against terrorism, and we always will. We have an extremely diverse country, and freedom of expression is something that we have, but we will always make sure that we are pushing back against violence and extremism in all its forms." He talks about diversity and freedom of expression. But does he really practice what he preaches? Has he upheld the right for his own citizens? It seems to us that this freedom to express applies differently on different issues. It's a matter of convenience. In February 2020, there were protests in Canada. Rail crossings were shut. Train schedules were disrupted. There was violence in some parts. The Indigenous community in Canada was protesting against a gas pipeline project. How did Trudeau's administration respond? Well, it made matters worse. It conducted raids and carried out a series of arrests in British Columbia. And guess what Mr. Trudeau had to say about these protests? He asked the protesters to respect the rule of law. Why does he not tell this to those spreading anti-India hatred on Canadian soil? Why is he letting them misuse freedom of speech? The Indian government is calling out this hypocrisy. This is what India's Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Arindam Bagchi, had to say. Let me quote. "We have seen media reports about comments by Prime Minister Trudeau. The issue is not about freedom of expression, but its misuse for advocating violence, propagating separatism, and legitimizing terrorism." It could not be put more aptly. It is now up to Canada to decide whether it wants this issue to impact bilateral ties, whether it wants to uphold its relationship with India, or its vote bank compulsions.